So, welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. Today we have the pleasure of having Michelle Bajwa, the founder of Domain Computer Services, on the show. And we're going to talk about women in business. We're going to talk about getting outside your comfort zone. We're going to talk about work-life balance.
Let's do it.
What does that look like? Crazy. And so we're going to explore all these things. I've had the pleasure of seeing Michelle speak a couple of times over the last year about different topics, and they've all been great. So we're going to dive right in.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Good stuff. So we're going to start with your story, but specifically around changing paths from what your parents potentially wanted from you and going the path that you wanted for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So growing up, I am actually an only child. And so you have pressure of being an only child and also just cultural pressure of being Asian, and parents came over and really, sacrificed a lot.
Yes.
And then put all their dreams and hopes into their children.
Correct.
Into their child, rather. So when I went to college, my parents wanted me to be a doctor because that's what smart people, successful people do. They become doctors, scientists, they wear white coats, and they make a really, stable income, and, everyone pats them on the back for doing a great job. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I really didn't like science. I mean, I like marine biology and, little things like that, but I wasn't a scientist per se. So freshman year, I, take, all the math classes, science classes. I hit organic chem, and I was just miserable. I didn't know what to do with those Tinker Toy things. And, they're actually models. And I remember taking an exam thinking I haven't the slightest clue of what I'm doing. And I'm actually not very passionate about it. I didn't really find any motivation in understanding all the elements and things like that.
To spend all that time studying.
Right. And then it was just sort of a catharsis for me because I thought, I'm sitting here in this exam and I'm not enjoying this at all. And it's such torture. So what if I get into a career while I wake up and I kind of am a terrible scientist, God forbid, a terrible doctor. And I did it just because my parents told me to. So that was when that transformation happened. I realized I had an interest in English and English literature, creative writing, poetry. So I switched majors from science-based, like a biology major.
Freshman, sophomore, junior?
Right after the freshman year. So then there was the whole financial aspect too, because I spent a whole year on a biology track. However, as a freshman, it's okay because there's a lot of core classes, so it wasn't that big of a loss. So when I tried to explain to my parents that I was going to switch from a science-based, industry to liberal arts, they thought I'd lost my mind. They had aunts and uncles call me. Are you sure you know what you're doing? I think that maybe you should move back home and, do something else. I mean, it was really, it really sort of rocked the boat. It rocked their world. The interesting thing, though, is as I was able to debate with them and explain to them, I actually just convinced myself even more because I realized waking up in the morning I was going to be the one that had to find that love, that passion, that motivation to get up. And so that's when I switched to pre-law pursuit, which then I actually didn't even pursue either.
Yeah, so. Which we'll definitely get into. Before we do that, we got to give a shout out to the college. What's the college?
Oh, yes, of course. Rutgers University. Yay.
Go RU.
Douglas College.
There we go. All right, so let's continue that story.
Yes.
So now you've graduated with English and pre-law. In this
it
arena.
was an English major and a political science minor.
Okay.
In that process, and being a pre-law student, I got a job, and because I thought, I want a little bit of financial independence, so I got a job at a law firm. And at that law firm, I realized everyone was doing a lot of typewriter work, and it was 1990, I want to say 6, 7.
Okay.
Yeah, around there, 1997, I would say. And we had computers, but they were Windows 3.1, and we were just doing basic word processing on it. Freshman year of college, I had an electronic typewriter with memory. So I used to type out all my essays in a one-line LED or LCD or whatever it is, like thing. And then I would have to memorize how many lines back and then delete.
Wow.
So anyway, we came a long way in that 1 year, 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, 'cause we were on the verge of the tech bubble at that
Exactly.
time.
The tech bubble was blowing up, and people were gaining access to something crazy called the internet.
Yeah.
And they were using AOL, and at that time, you would get a CD in the mail, and for $19.95, you could pop that CD in, and you would dial up with a modem, a dial-up modem, which was crazy. And then that's why if you see that movie, You've Got Mail, with, whoever it is, that sound in there is that like, shh, that when you connect. It's basically, if you go to old school stores now, you have that credit card machine, and it'll dial up. It's that same sound.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's like Pavlov's dog, actually, because I hear that with the credit card, and I immediately think back, to those beginning years of Domain. So anyhow, everyone was kind of really discovering what the internet was.
Yeah.
At that time, everyone had computers in the law office. Everyone had computers on their desk.
Okay.
But it was more just for, typing letters, individualized letters. No one really networked at all. It was just, for ease rather than waste paper. Gotcha. So I approached my boss and I said, listen, you have these typewriters here and you're buying pre-printed forms from vendors, and these forms were legal pleadings. And if you're familiar with the legal industry, there's pleading paper, and so they have 2 lines on the left and 1 line on the right.
Gotcha.
Anyhow, through that time, I had actually become pretty well-versed in desktop publishing, and this is just because something I enjoyed during college. And I told them I can duplicate all of this stuff in Microsoft Word or WordPerfect. And their minds were blown. Really? We don't have to buy all these boxes of paper anymore? I'm like, no. We can just print them off of our laser printers. It'll be fine.
Amazing.
So
you communicated the value right there.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like I can do this, but there's a reason why I can do this.
Exactly. So it was also because I, selfishly speaking, I wanted overtime.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted, I was like, I can make some money here and I don't have to ask my parents for anything. So, and this was like 18-year-old Michelle thinking, So anyhow, there was pleading lines, and I was creating pleading paper for them and doing motions, and it was mail merging. And if I think forward 5 years after that, I realized back then I was planting the roots of document automation, which is now what World Docs is created with, and et cetera. So it was really cool. I felt like I was making a change, and I realized that I enjoyed that technical aspect, providing IT support, more than the actual mechanics of law.
Yeah.
I found it interesting, but I'm naturally an introverted person. So the idea of litigating in a courthouse scared, the living daylights out of me. And I was working for a personal injury firm, and a lot of our money was made on litigating in court. So at that time, Rashad and I were very good friends, and he got a ticket, and it was in, I think, close to the municipality that I was working in.
Okay.
And he was working in internal IT for a company close by in Princeton. And we had no money at the time. So when we found out that a speeding ticket to be represented in municipal court was $600, again, we were like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So then Rashad, always being the innovator and the one with the ideas, thought, let's do a barter. So he asked my boss, will you represent me in court if I set up your office with a peer-to-peer network and, get you on this crazy thing called the internet.
Okay, awesome.
And so my bosses at that time were like, we're already on the internet, but wow, we can share it. So there was a certain software we could install that would allow everyone in the office, which was about 5 people, to share one internet access point for $19.95 a month.
Wow.
And they were like mind blown. And so everyone thought that we were whiz kids, and that, it was, you could feel sort of the momentum catching on, because in that surrounding environment, you had the internet was coming up. People were understanding what Yahoo was, and how to search things, and how it's not an encyclopedia, but you just put in your search terms. All of that was just revolutionary for people. Yeah. Being able to check your stocks and the weather at the drop of a hat, that was also just all that information. So everyone was getting excited about it. What's interesting is, courts are very important for, our legal system, but they're also a meeting place. And so my boss at the time was always meeting with other attorneys in the court. Yeah. In that process, the names of Rashad and Michelle were passed around. Oh, I've got these whiz kids that can share our internet access. And then this other clerk that works for me who can set up all of your pleadings online. I mean, online, but, on the computer.
Yeah.
And so that's how Domain was started. Yeah.
So
it was all word of mouth.
Word of mouth. So there's a couple of questions I want to ask around that. First is, one, you're a woman, very young age.
Oh, yeah.
Communicating with attorneys back in the day.
Yeah, very scary.
So what was that like, and more importantly, how did you build trust with them and communicate what you needed to get done?
Right. So being a woman, for sure, being young actually was also almost a handicap at that time.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully not as much anymore, but at that time, yes, it was, because people thought I was inexperienced.
Right.
Also, there was something that was going for us in the sense that no one really knew what IT was.
Okay.
So it kind of, I guess, in the minds of our clients at the time, it necessitated, it was a necessity for us to be young in order to be on top of things.
And understand
them. We had like these crazy flexible minds that it could understand, what networks were, right? And so that's what it was back then. Okay. So that we were able to work in our favor. In terms of winning people over and becoming a trusted advisor, which is what we, now, support to our, or help our staff believe and, service. We just focused on results. We focused on the process. We focused on, okay, so what is it that we're trying to get done?
Okay.
For me specifically, when I was able to focus on the project, I was doing all software customization. So for me, it was really understanding the workflows of the office, who did what, who was the bottleneck. So I was also kind of doing some business consulting in terms of operations, but it was very specific to the legal field, which I had already had about a year of experience in. And I knew every document, so that kind of also helped. I was able to prove my chops just by being accountable and providing answers.
So a big focus on the results that you were going to give to the people that you were working with and for, and then understanding their background and their knowledge, and then them having to trust in you on the IT side.
Right. So, and that's a really big part of IT consulting. It's not so much where I'm just going to go and check a box and then you're going to be able to walk away and everything will be fixed. They actually had to put trust in me to explain and understand what they were doing. What is their pain point? So if we didn't have a connection, they actually wouldn't be able to get as much out of, whatever fee they were paying us.
Exactly.
So it was a very much give and take relationship. I absolutely, like any person, I had absolute insecurities about my youth, about my appearance, about stereotypes that others may have about me. But I realized that if I ruminated about those insecurities, I'd actually stumble over my words.
Correct.
Or I wouldn't perform as well, just because I was more worried about, are they happy, are they not happy? It wasn't, it took my focus off of the project and the goals. So that's how I was just very focused. on the actual project.
It's great insights. So now we've done this, we've gotten to here, and now all of a sudden we have a business out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
You guys are.
I mean, it feels like a long time, but yeah, it was like. I mean, I guess at that time, and again, a maturity comes with this sort of silly outlook, but we were about 19 when we started consulting with other law firms.
Okay.
But by the time Domain was incorporated, we were just about to turn 21.
Gotcha.
And so there was a bit of a progression. It wasn't like in 6 months and boom.
Yeah.
There were no angel investors at that time, none of that.
No.
So there was a progression. There was a lot of success and failures. So by the time we started the company, we kind of had an idea of what we wanted the company to look like.
Okay.
We realized early on that our edge was that we were able to relate to our clients. Back then, there was a very famous SNL skit with this a stereotypical IT guy.
Okay.
And so he would come in and people are so frustrated. It's just a general working space. People are very, very frustrated. And the IT guy sees them all throwing their hands up in the air and he doesn't say hello. He doesn't ask them how they are. Doesn't ask them what the problem is. He just looks at the screen, pushes them away and says, move. And then he just starts typing.
Okay.
And so that was the antithesis to what we were. And we realized that was our edge. Our edge was we were actually nice consultants. and we weren't, strange, and we didn't, linger too long. We actually were focused on the results, but we're pleasant to be around.
Gotcha.
And so that was the initial mission statement, which is like, don't be too weird. Yeah.
Gotcha. So with that, so from 18 or 19-ish to 21 years old.
To 21-ish, yep.
And even 21 to 25, let's say, I'm sure there was many failures, per se, that you guys had to deal with.
Yeah.
So from one of the speeches you gave, there was a really good lesson in there about how you looked at those failures and how you learned from them. So if you could just give us a general idea on that, when you came across failures, what did that mean to you guys, and how did you overcome them?
So Rashad and I are, we have different social personalities, but we're also very similar in our work ethics, work ethic. We're perfectionists. And so we sweat every detail, which makes failure very hard to swallow.
Yeah.
And so being perfectionists, we were always very devastated initially, and especially in our youth, because there was real money on the table. There were people who were, this was their livelihood, this was their business. So our failures, we really, had a hard time recovering from in the early years.
Yeah.
What the shift happened when we realized that if we took emotion out of it and we were more analytical about what we did wrong and treated those failures as teaching moments, it really helped us gain perspective.
Okay.
When you're dealing in a customer service industry and you're dealing with people who are frustrated, it's their job to be, that's why you have a job, because they're frustrated.
Exactly.
And they don't know how to work this thing in front of them. It's our job to stay calm, and it's not our job to always know everything, every answer, the second the problem presents itself. We really shine when we are able to, again, maintain perspective and provide solutions, research those solutions, and execute them.
Okay.
It's that kind of handling of that crisis situation where we realized we were able to prove the most value. And so once that we realized that, okay, you don't have to, hem and haw and, sigh and yell at we don't have to yell back at the client, which we never did, but we never had to be as self-deprecating. We could just say, okay, noted that, failover didn't work so well, so let's try another route.
Gotcha.
And they would be frustrated, but then I think a lot of, cooler heads always prevail. So once they calm down, the job was already done.
Yeah.
Right?
So then as you growed, as you developed, as you matured, those failures were less as looking at them as failures, but as teachable moments.
Always teachable moments. And further on too, the next largest challenge for us in building the company was learning how to manage a team.
Yeah.
People always look at me, right? People always look at me and they say, gosh, you live and work with the same person, but you've lived and worked for the same person for the last 22 years. Mm-hmm. How do you even still like each other? Like, why are you even in the same space, right?
Yeah.
And it's really because we've built so many different things together. We have 3 kids. We have we have 3 businesses, 3 kids. None of that could have happened without just transparency and patience. And I think in all of those failures and handling them, we kind of learned, okay, nothing's ever going to go as planned. So it's how we recover. That's when we really grow as individuals and as human beings. So, yeah.
I love that. And I think there's a lot to learn from the audience there on that point as well, right? As we're all doing things, whether our significant others, internally, there's a lot to be learned about patience, understanding, transparency, all of that.
Yeah. It doesn't always work. I mean,
no. And there's a lot of hard conversations.
We're not always transparent with each other, but, if I say it out loud, I think it'll make, life easier in the future.
Okay. So let's get into real quickly on work-life balance, right? 3 kids, wife, mother, 3 businesses.
Yeah.
Busy mornings. Busy nights.
Busy mornings.
Tell us how you think about that concept.
So work-life, and I've been thinking about it a lot because recently the kids have gotten older. We have one that's 14, another one that's 11, and the youngest is 8. And we're now going to add a dog into the mix, which I'm not really too sure.
Interesting.
I've already put the deposit down, so I can't back out. So
we'll talk after this.
Yeah, I know. It's making me sweat just thinking about it. I'm realizing, though, you have to surround yourself with a really great support system. And so I see a lot of mothers out there struggling. It's amazing. If you sit down at a soccer practice, a baseball practice, or whatever, and you just listen to the mothers around you, they are juggling 5, 6, 7 things at a time. Yep. And it's really important things like doctor's appointments and parent-teachers conferences and getting from one field to the other. And it's 30 minutes away, right? Jobs, checking their email, responding to that. And we always say at our Monday morning meetings, multitasking doesn't work. So what we do, I think we're really good at microtasking, which is just, okay, one thing and then another thing and another thing, right? So the only way that I'm able to do that is by having an excellent team around me.
Okay.
And also going back to patience and transparency, being transparent about the fact that I am juggling a lot of things and I have to be able to recognize when I can't deliver. Yeah. And I think that has been a big lesson for me professionally as well. That whole point that I had made back then, earlier in the conversation about not needing to know everything the second the problem presents itself, that has been something that I've struggled with my whole life. And so now that I'm getting older, I'm realizing, okay, have patience with yourself. And if you don't have the answer, you have to know how to ask for help. So yeah, work-life balance is crazy.
Yeah, love it. So so we'll go more to get to know Michelle a little bit more personally right now. What is, if you were to go back to, let's do your 25-year-old self. So you're a couple years into business now. The ship's kind of getting a little bit more steady than potentially it had been in those college years.
Yeah,
what would you give your advice to your 25-year-old self looking back from where you are now?
Don't be so overconfident. I had a problem in my early 20s about being overconfident. I thought that if I exuded, just don't worry about it. I know I got this. Whatever it is whatever the problem is, I got this. So what happened was I was closing myself off to really opening my eyes and looking around and seeing the more potential needs of others. Because as I mentioned, I did a lot of software consulting. So I would come into an office and I would customize the software and then I would train the staff on it. Okay. It's tough because everyone resists change. So in order to compensate for that, I would exude confidence. But it wasn't, I think I overdid it in my early 20s. I think I overdid it. I think that I ended up not really listening to the needs of some people who may have been struggling at that time with learning. Yeah. And so I think that's more of a teacher issue than it is a technological issue. But I would tell myself to be a little bit, it's weird, even though I'm a quiet person, I tend to be a little bit stubborn. Gotcha. Right? Yeah, and so, so that's what I would tell my 25-year-old stuff.
Ask for help.
Chill out. Just chill out. Chill out, girl.
I love it. What's next? So the next thing is I'm an avid reader.
Yes.
And I believe the organization is too, yourself may be included in that. Yeah. So the thing I always like to know is the question on what books have you gifted the most, actually given to other people, or what books have changed your thought processes the most?
So the book that I recently gifted to my daughter was The Confidence Code for Girls by Katty Kay and Kate Chipman. Yeah. And I read the adult version very recently. That changed my the forgiveness that I have for myself in recognizing what confidence is. That's always been something that's eluded me in terms of, remember that overconfidence point that I had made? I always thought it was a very dominant personality. You had to stride into the room and be like, take over the whole conversation. Everyone shuts up. And I thought that that was just a normal thing, that je ne sais quoi that people have. Okay. In this book, it talks about exuding an authentic confidence. The authentic confidence is the kind that is the most effective. And it's not being a dominant type A personality. It's just kind of coming in and, okay, this is what I think, but having enough confidence to say, okay, what is it that you think as well? So that book has really, really reshaped sort of my mental outlook. And then I'm a big fan of historical fiction and also just anything historical.
Okay.
And so I recently read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead.
Okay.
And that was really great.
Is there a time era in history that you really like to explore?
For some reason, I think it's because when I went to Douglas, I took a lot of African studies and African literature, African American literature courses. So I have a huge affinity for them. Okay. The immigrant experience, slavery, understanding the nuances behind that. Our education back then didn't really address all of the pain and the struggle and what an economic boom it was for 300 years. So I'm always very hungry to learn more about that. I know it's strange, but yeah, I have a big affinity for that.
Okay. The final question is, who is a thought leader here in the Northeast that maybe the audience doesn't know about or should learn more about because they're in our backyard?
So I'm laughing because we talked about this earlier, and I'll mention other than Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who are on the Northeast. I have to say that because I'm going to read Becoming by Michelle Obama. That's my next. Okay. That's my next book. Anyway, other than those two, it's Michelle Meyer-Ship, and so I believe she works for KPMG. And I've met her on a few occasions, and she's I believe the director of diversity and inclusion, and she is so well studied, so open, so compassionate, and I just feel like she's an authority on a lot of interesting things. I find all of her articles extremely interesting.
And where do you find those articles from?
On LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. All right. So we'll have Tyler.
She may be on Twitter too, but I'm not on Twitter
as well. Okay. We will make sure that we have Tyler linked to her profile on LinkedIn so you can check out her articles as well as her company as well to find out more about her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's a great person to know. The diversity inclusion conversation continues to happen. It continues to get explored and probably needs to get explored further between a lot of organizations. So, Michelle, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Good to see you.